now time for us to take a look at the intentional steps that need to be taken for it. Yes, you heard it right. So for the last session of the day, we have IDF's advisory board engaged in a panel discussion on the topic, intentional inclusion. Are you doing enough to incite positive changes? I'd like to invite our moderator of this session, Ms. Vidyottama Sharma, Editor-in-Chief, India Diversity Forum. Our panelists are the advisors of IDF, Ms. Anisha Motwani, Founder and Director, STN Ventures, Mr. Gautam Chainani, Group President, Human Resources, Strategic Initiatives and Workforce Automation, JSW, Dr. Ritu Anand, Chief Leadership and Diversity Officer, TCS, Ms. Sudha Ravi, CCO, Piramal Capital and Housing Finance Limited, Mr. Ankit Bansal, Founder and CEO, Sapphire Human Solutions. Requesting the leaders to take over. The panel is yours.
Thank you, Ankita. Hi, everybody. We take up a very important aspect of diversity, equity, and inclusion in this discussion. And I'm very happy that I have 5 of the 6 advisors of India Diversity Forum to share their expertise and viewpoints. Much has been said during the day, and I would like to keep my introduction very short. We're taking up the issue of intentional inclusion. And as we all understand, diversity and inclusion are not checkboxes. However, often they end up being just that, checkboxes. Diversity will be meaningless without inclusion. You can recruit as many professionals from as many diverse backgrounds that you want, but if they do not feel included, you haven't completed your job. So what is necessary to move out of the checkbox mode to rightful implementation mode? Intention. If you do not have the intention to go beyond implementing something in principle to implementing it in spirit and action, then you lack the intention to do it. In one of its articles, Harvard Business Review says, diversity doesn't stick without inclusion. So we'll come to the leadership angle and the action arena a little later in the discussion. Let us first understand the basic of the subject, and I turn to Dr. Ritu Anand for that. Ritu, can you please tell us, what is intentional inclusion actually? Why do we need to discuss on intention when organizations are already adopting D&I policies? Are we lacking in spirit somewhere?
Thank you, Vidyottama, and happy to be here. You know, when a couple of years ago, or even more recently, the intentional word was added to inclusion, I found it very exciting and very curious also that we are having to call it intentional. But over the years, or last few 18 months or so, this word has been used very often, almost. So the best way I would describe is that there was a stage when we were unaware. Then we moved to being aware. Then the real stuff comes in, which is a state of mindfulness. And then we reach to intention. So when I was unaware, I was just focusing on take what comes, hire whoever applies. And I had disregard for diversity or this topic at all. Be aware, all of you, that while I'm talking about this, some of us are talking about 30 years ago, some of us maybe even yesterday. So then awareness led to automaticity, that, typically what we call autopilot. So, the automaticity came in where we were conscious, but we didn't know what to do. And many of my panelists have spoken about it since morning. I've been listening. Mindfulness led to sensitization and conscious effort. D&I leaders came in. Their goals were started to get fleshed out, and then intention came. And that's what today's time is about. We need inclusion intentionally. We need diversity intentionally by design, because we are living in a world full of multiplicity, multiple culture, multiple perspectives, and multiple people. And I will talk about it as the panel gets into a discussion a bit later. So, intentionally leveraging all segments of diversity, and the big word is by design, every step of the way, with the language of positivity and progress.
Thank you, Ritu. That sets our foundation. I remember that a very dynamic advocate of inclusion, Victoria Pelletier, has said, intentional inclusion comes with great benefit, but this choice necessitates thoughtful leadership, candid conversations, and an investment of your time, your knowledge and experience, and your commitment to your colleagues' success. So, when we are talking of thoughtful leadership, and after what Ritu just said, Gautam, I come to you. We are all aware that diversity seems a very attractive term, but the organizations often pawn off its implementation to an overstretched HRT. Perhaps the intention is lacking, perhaps the circumstances aren't conducive. Why do you think that leaders do not intentionally strategize to make work cultures inclusive? Why does proper planning and implementation of inclusion in the right spirit become such a daunting challenge? Gautam.
Thanks, Vidyottama. I must say that this is a very vast and deep subject, and probably one could do a doctorate on it, but I'll try and close this in 10 minutes, right? So I just want to go back a bit. The diversity movement actually started with this concept of tokenism, and tokenism was all about getting quotas and numbers into the organization. And the belief at that point in time was that you get a critical mass of diversity into the organization, and the group of women or whichever diverse group you have will take care of itself. So that is what it started off with many years back. And then it moved to good to have, and then must to have, shifts that began to happen over a period of time. But if you really look back in terms of, and I'm just going to pick on some of the stuff that Ritu spoke about. If you look at from the Indian context, right? In India, we have a very young, diverse workforce, right? The average age is 26, 55% or more of the population is at that age group. But if you go down to the C-suites, right, especially, or the CXO C-suite level, especially in manufacturing, right, that number jumps to nearly 45 to 50. And if you really deep dive into the C-suite, there's hardly any penetration or availability of diverse candidates in that group of people. So it actually begins from there, because that group is such a homogeneous group. The rest of the organization is multi-generational workforce and a number of things, but that group does not have enough diversity that it begins to interact, engage, and get along with. So I think the problem is there, and unless we crack that problem, we are going to have an issue going forward as well. The other thing I think is the fact that we have over-engineered ourselves on the rational part of diversity. Now, I look at intentions from two angles. One is the rational part and the emotional part. And I think we have over-engineered the rational part of it. For example, there is so much emphasis on targets. There is so much emphasis on, KPIs, KRAs. I was speaking to a CHRO and he said that, look, all our CXOs actually have a diversity KPI in their goal sheet. But if you really deep dive into it, that number is probably 5 or 10%. Now, 10% weightage on a KPI or a KRA does not bring about any shift to the person, right? So while there is a certain amount of intention, which is from the rational side, I think the emotional side is continues to be missing. And I think unless we really want to really walk the talk, and we really want to invest our time and effort into it, it is not going to work. And I want to just share with you an example of manufacturing in coated steel, right? So we were having this huge challenge in coated steel of getting the right diversity profile into the plants. And we did that with hiring GTs, and we took 30% of the workforce as women, and we started doing that. And then over a period of time, we sat with the entire leadership team in Coated, and we said, look, if we really want to make this happen, we must have one of the plants in Coated run completely by women, right from the engineer right up to the manager running the production of the plant, the production, operations, maintenance, everything should be women. So it has taken us 6 months to get this in place. And in the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to launch a complete line, a complete production line. And let me tell you, each one of these lines do 500,000 tons, right, of coated steel, right? So we're going to get that, and this is going to be a completely all women's line to run with. And this then becomes a showcase, and this is a pilot that can get replicated across all other businesses and locations. So fundamentally, I think intentions have an element of letter and spirit. I think once we shift from the letter to the spirit, I think we'll start to see more of this happen.
Thank you, Gautam. I have something more for you a little later in the discussion when we are talking of letter and spirit and tokenism. You know what you and Ritu have said, it all reminds me about something that I've read on the web. And I like that observation of Dr. Linda Burst very much. She says in a write up on intentional inclusion that if leaders are not intentionally creating cultures of inclusion, then by default, they are creating cultures of exclusion. I think that's a very profound statement. And that leads us to the most important aspect, creating a strategy for intentional inclusion. Ankit, I come to you. What steps do you envisage in the process of creating a strategy for intentional inclusion? It is said since ages that where you have a will, you have a way. So we have the will, we have the intention to move out of the checkbox mode. So, what should we then do for being truly inclusive?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the question, Vidyottama. I have a 5-point agenda on how organizations can strategize for intentional inclusion. Point number 1, emphasize on the business case for diversity and inclusion. Will a more diversified workforce lead to better bottom lines? Studies by BCG, McKinsey, EY have actually shown that. Will a more inclusive workforce lead to better decision making? Does more women in your ranks lead to a more harmonious work atmosphere? Is your appreciation of consumer taste and interest better with a more diverse set of decision makers? I think leaders have to come on the same platform on their appreciation and acknowledgement of the business case of DNI. Point number 2, recognize bias. We all have blind spots. Important is to take cognizance of those blind spots. It may not be a bad idea for companies to actually hold, cohorts, focus groups, discussions to actually understand what are those inherent biases that we carry with ourselves. Better understanding of those biases will actually lead to more robust policy making. We will need to hold sensitization trainings, de-biasing sessions with leaders to make them aware of these biases and help them overcome them. Third, practice inclusive leadership. Now, leaders will need to create a safe team environment where all employees can speak up, be heard, feel welcome. They should be able to embrace the input of employees whose backgrounds or expertise differ from their own, foster collaboration among diverse staff, facilitate constructive arguments, and give actionable feedback or act upon the advice of diverse employees. Fourth, they should provide sponsorship programs. Now, one way I feel that DNI can be accelerated in any company is by having top management sponsored programs. For example, many companies have this Women Leaders program to bring more women into leadership. Reservation of one women independent director is actually one such bright example of such a program right at a government level. And last, but obviously certainly not the least, as they say, hold leaders accountable. Make sure that inclusion is a core value of the company, not just something that you do as a tick in the box, as you rightly said. Companies need to fix and define their DNI targets and goals and put tracking mechanisms in place. We all know about the famous boundaryless KRA instituted by Jack Welch in GE to promote inclusion. Some organizations even go to the extent of tying up a portion of bonuses on achievement of D&I goals. And I completely agree with the point that Gautam made, that we need to have emotion sometimes override rationality also. So while it is good to have targets, but I think getting those targets down at a individual level and helping people realize the importance behind those targets is even critical. So, but I think leaders need to be accountable. I think if we have these mechanisms in place, organizations should be able to demonstrate and have good D&I policies and culture in their ranks. Thank you.
Sure, Ankit. I'm very happy that the points all the speakers are bringing out. I have some very leading questions a little later in the discussion. So thank you for that. Now that Ankit has given us an insight into what can be done to create a well-founded strategy for intentional inclusion, a question arises, and the question is of fear. Anisha, there is a fear that including new voices comes at the cost of excluding the voices that are already in place. Why this fear of inclusion being a zero sum game, that if someone wins, the other side is going to lose? What can be done to bust this myth? Because at the end of it all, it is a serious and committed intention that is going to make the process seamless and smooth. Anisha. Anisha, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, I said thank you, Vidyottama. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think it's a very interesting question because fundamentally, the whole definition of diversity has now got I added to it, which is diversity and inclusion. And you are asking me a question which is about exclusion. So it does seem oxymoronic at one level, If you do not include a voice, what is D&I? How will you include genders and geographies and caste and skills and all kinds of inclusion? The first inclusion has to be of a women's voice. For me, that is a more practical, expression of an understanding of diversity and inclusion. So if you don't include the voices, you obviously will not include them in many, many other things, and you will not include the broader definition of inclusion that is now, that we've now started discussing. That inclusion and diversity is not just about gender, but many other aspects. So voice of the other side. Okay, I just, there are 2-3 controversial things I might say. See, fundamentally, if we get very practical about it, as parents, why do we insist that a child needs both a mother and a father? Okay, we always say that, one parent is not able to do, a holistic development of a child because both parents bring in different perspectives to the upbringing and parenting of a child. It's as simple as that. If we apply that same principle, that these are two complementary skill sets, a male skill set and a women's skill set, at a skill set level, they might be same. As a business strategist, as a marketer, as a finance guy, I might have the same skills, but my approach to those skills, my approach to how I take decisions, my approach to how I deal with teams and people is fundamentally very different. Women do bring in a certain different aspect of nurturing and caring and being a little more broad-based and inclusive. And at times there are also characteristics like emotion, which might sometimes, not play out the way it's supposed to play out. But that's the side that women bring in. On the other side, the male decision making is a lot more factual, it's a lot more linear, it's a lot more decisive. This thing, women do want to speak to 5 people before they actually just take a call. So there are different aspects, and that's not because we are genetically different. So the yin and the yang philosophy, the Chinese philosophy, is about the two sides complementing each other. Having said that, sometimes, like I said, I'll say something controversial. The onus is also on women to see their skills as complementary skills. Many women end up behaving like men to succeed. They feel that they have to have their voice heard. Instead of, doing it the natural way, they try and replicate which they think is the right way, which is the masculine way of doing things. Okay, so that's why you see many women leaders today, get labeled as, I mean, she's a terror, or she's an aggressive boss and stuff like that. Obviously lots of awareness and consciousness has now happened. So women also need to understand that to succeed, they need to play their natural game the right way, okay, and not try and actually replicate the way the male colleagues look at success, or look at their career, or look at any aspect of their profession. So if they complement each other, there are no conflicts. There are absolutely no, pushes and pulls, because nobody is actually trying to take away from each other. We are trying to add, and take the whole journey forward. And that's why some of the things that Ankit said about, the outcomes are so much better. The business outcomes are so much better. Only those outcomes will become so much better if we actually play to each other's strength, and not try and replicate each other's strength or run down each other's strengths. Sometimes, we do hear women talk about, the unconscious biases that they experience, in conversations, in decision makings, where a point made softly is somehow just taken as a point made lightly. So if both sides actually try and play to their strengths and come from their respective ways of doing things, the 1 + 1 will become an 11, not even a 2.
Okay, Anisha, thank you. She's brought in a very important point about genetically being different. However, that too could be debatable by a few panelists, but yeah, that's a point that you brought in. And as we all women are leaving homes and entering into the work field, and the men are beginning to try and help at home, I believe the roles and qualities and individualities are somehow merging as well. But thank you for that brilliant point, Anisha. So it is normally believed that inclusive language might be the first step towards expressing our intention of true inclusion. Inclusion is a state that exists in a team culture where diversities are not just accepted, but also valued and given respect. So I'm coming back to Ritu. Ritu, in a corporate setup, quite often the scene is, are you managing a culture, or is a culture managing you? I'm asking you a difficult question here, because suppose the culture of an organization is too tough to break the stereotype, or perhaps its management is not too inclined towards inclusion. In principle, it would be, but maybe in action, it isn't. What can a diversity and inclusion lead do? A culture cannot be left to chance. It has to be nurtured. And let us be frank here. The scene is not as hunky-dory as we think or believe it to be. Ritu.
Tough one. Don't debate that. And see, culture is a abused, misused, used word. I can even personally, through my personal experience, and many of at least Gautam I would know would go back to many decades. I would say that 3 decades, I personally can say I've been struggling to define. How do you define culture? So anyway, we have really moved on from there to the stage, which I think in one of your articulation, Vidyottama, you mentioned that small things actually make the whole, and I like that allusion too much. So when I talk about culture, obviously all of you know that I represent a company which is now 53 years old, and so we've seen, we like many of you, steel also, and we have seen it all from uh, blue memos to social media. Let me put it this way: from hiding all that what your CEO is getting, to actually letting the most published and read newspaper read his salary and debate about it whether she is getting more or less. I mean to say, when I can very happily tell all the audience who are listening, who are not as old as I am, that the scene looks very different when you have seen it all. Trust me, my mother used to say it, my father would have said it, but we never believed them. But if you want to, you can believe. That scene looks very different from when I started talking about culture. If you have the will, you have the intention, and you have the clarity, you can actually get there in a period of time, not short. Whenever I try to accelerate the change, I was shot down because I could see that I don't have friends working with me. And me is not me as Ritu, but me is my company or your company or the institution that you carry. But if you have the belief to go beyond what you are currently in, you can actually touch the culture. So I will come to specifics. We really need to talk about tips and tools that diversity and inclusion leaders in each company can take. And one of it that I would make help share with you to realize is understand and what should I say, realize that there is an inherent diversity and acquired diversity. Okay, we all focus on inherent diversity. I'm a man or a woman. I'm having a different sexual orientation. I'm young. I'm old. I'm able or disabled. That is the inherent diversity. Sometimes you really can't help it what you are, and so that we are focusing on that. What about acquired diversity, which is actually acquired through the lived beliefs or lived experiences, not beliefs, lived experiences? I have been to 10 countries. I have traveled and experienced the culture vis-a-vis reading it. Or I have moved domains and technologies and companies, and I bring different kind of values or different kind of language that I speak, and I understand and appreciate. So the intention here is that when I was forming my team, I consciously selected a person from Delhi, from Meghalaya, from, of course, Maharashtra, and also other states, which I knew brought in a different way of thinking. And not to forget, somebody from England and somebody from Europe. That so this is because of my experience. So this is one way of moving towards changing the culture or living the culture. Your top leadership has to be on your side, and the DNI leaders responsibility is to create a metaphor, a story, a package to first get that on your side. The second piece, big one, not very conscious of the time, the second piece which I want to leave with you is, why are we even talking about intentional inclusion or inclusion? Why? Because the diversity of the thought process, and all of you may have read it, that I'm talking about the model, the diversity of the mind. Actually, that is what business will lap it up. They become curious. Men and women, leaders and young generations, teams and managers. They will want to know that if I get Ritu in the team or a John in the team, the road which I want to traverse and the time I want to take it, it will be faster, slower, or better or not, innovative or not. And there is enough literature which talks about it, that yes, that it is. So guys and girls, the my lovely audience, you are listening. Sadly, I can't see you, but if you are able to hold the space of culture in your ecosystem, many of you are large organization, many of you are from very small organization, many of you are from growing organization. So if you are able to hold that space of wanting, knowing and believing that which culture you really want to see, obviously I would say your hands up will be on inclusive culture where everybody is embraced. Then there are tips and tools in around you for you to use.
Thank you, Ritu. Inherent and acquired diversity and the various points that you brought up, brilliant. So I will take this issue a little further, and I'm coming back to you, Gautam. When there isn't an intention, there is pink washing. Just in the previous fireside chat, also we had this talk of rainbow washing, and you also spoke of tokenism. So corporates like to be perceived as doing much towards diversity and inclusion, but in reality, as we've discussed so far, many just like to be in the league. Something that I posed to Ritu also earlier. I would like to know from you, Gautam, how adversely does this pink washing affect the brand per se? and also people in the organization, because it will definitely impact their mental well-being in an organization that loves to reap the benefits but does not do enough. Gautam.
Sorry. So, coming to Ritu's point, I think companies have a culture, and companies that do pink washing have what I call agriculture. So, just on a lighter vein, let me just, tell you that before we talk about the term pink washing, I want to just talk about whitewashing, right? Because I know we're not discussing a laundry wash, but I just want to give you a perspective on what these two terms are so that we are clear, right? So whitewashing basically attempts to conceal or dilute unpleasant facts, right? That is what whitewashing is. But pinkwashing, which was coined in 2002, actually is a critique to companies that market product, right, with basically pink ribbons, which symbolize that they support things like breast cancer. But on the same hand, they actually, promote carcinogenic products, right? So there is a mixed messaging that tends to go around by companies which do pink washing. And I just want to share with you a couple of examples that I came across on pink washing, and I think it's very important because it has a very different dimension from a human relation perspective. And the first is I was speaking to somebody who was working with an FMCG company, and he actually mentioned that it's unfortunate, he said, that the CEO is so passionate about diversity and LGBTQ, right? Extremely passionate about that whole thing. But there is a complete silence, or there is a complete withdrawal from the C-suite or the CXOs. So on one hand, the CEO is constantly communicating the need to build a culture of inclusion with LGBTQ, with diverse workforce and so on. But when it comes down to the next level, there is a complete gap or a complete dissonance that is happening there. As a result, what tends to happen is that employees, hear something from the CEO, but when it's actually walk the talk, it's completely different. And this leads to a lot of dissonance and critiquing within the organization as to, what is happening and why this whole thing, and it just muddies the water, right? That is from an employee perspective. It creates dissonance to see, the leader talk about it. This is such an important thing. And it's also important from a millennial perspective, because millennials want to look at purpose in the organization, right? That is a very important element for them to bond with the organization. The other example that I read about was about a company in the US, right, which was a liquor company, which actually targeted and marketed products to the LGBT community. But on the same hand, being a Midwest company, was extremely conservative. So, kept the LGBTQ community out from being in the hiring process or, adding people into the fold. So on one hand, while they embraced the LGBT customers, they kind of disassociated themselves from the LGBT employees. Now that was something that not just affected the employees, but also had an effect on the brand. Because let's not forget, with digital and social media today, the amount of social transparency that exists is phenomenal, right? So I think these are things that if companies are not careful about, can have a significant impact on the brand and also on the hiring and retention of people over a period.
Gautam, I really like the idea of you explaining the whitewashing versus pinkwashing and then giving the examples. Embracing and the LGBTQ customers and ignoring the employees. I believe that's a very interesting point. Ankit, I'm coming to you. Let's go back to the time when the issue of diversity and inclusion entered our work arena. The sincerity of the beginners who brought up the issue was very palpable. But the course of action wasn't clear then. And I'm afraid we stand at the same crossroads, more or less, even now. I'm now widening the topic, bringing in the diversity issue also, because both of these, diversity and inclusion, are Siamese twins. One doesn't exist without the other. So what approach, Ankit, do you envisage to deal with our implicit and explicit biases? Bottom to top to bottom, horizontal streams thrown in with the vertical approach. I mean, can we afford to be selective about where to begin, or do we need to go all out at all the angles, all the levels, all the functions, all the decision makers, all the performers? What do you think should be the right approach?
That's an interesting question, Vidyottama. Let me try and answer that by taking a bias. Now, we all must have heard of a common bias that women are possibly not good at driving, right? I'm sure everybody has heard of this one, right? So, how do you overcome this bias? Now, you will, as a woman, approve of this bias if you don't drive. And conversely, if you're a good driver, you will be very soon to rubbish it and say, this is not true. Now, will your bias change if I was to say that out of 10,000 road accidents that occurred last year, only 1,200 involved women? Now, over here, we are talking of organizational bias, blind spots, which hurt more at a cultural, social, economic level than individual biases. And I wish there was an easy answer to overcome or an approach to overcome those. Depending upon the bias, I think the approach would need to be decided. For example, if the bias is DNI is just a fancy phrase, then you may have to take a top-down approach, giving facts, figures, and as I said earlier, establishing the business case of DNI. And if the bias is people from a particular caste or community are not good at doing a particular job, then it might need a grounds-up approach from training sessions to establishing live cases to dispel that bias. So it would really depend on which bias we are handling and accordingly decide the approach for that bias.
Great. I'm not taking that point further because I'm a little conscious of the fact that I haven't asked Sudha a question, and I would like to state here that Sudha was expected to join us late, so I had kept you a little late, perhaps unconscious bias. So Sudha, some organizations carry out training workshops in sensitizing their workforce towards diversity and inclusion. Are these workshops doing enough, or do we need to go much beyond these workshops and lectures and discussions? Would you like to take that?
Thank you very much, Vidyottama. Yes, I was supposed to join late, but luckily could join immediately because I could hear all of you. I really liked the example which Ankit gave because it really gelled with me, to be very honest, because this is something which you constantly hear. But coming to your question, Vidyottama, I strongly feel, yes, you need all these trainings which are being done, but is that sufficient? Because typically, like Gautam had said, it's about ticking the box. People think you have to do 3 trainings per year and that's all and that's finished. The problem with trainings is it has to go much deeper. You do need to have measurements to see whether this training has been effective. Is it actually tackling the issue, as Ankit said, about bias? Is it addressing that bias issue which is there, especially with the people who are bringing in this diverse team, the HR people? Have you taken specific training for the bias areas for the HR people? Have you taken it for the leadership team first? As Gautam said, the C-suite problem is still existing. And the problem is all this inclusion, everything is driven by the C-suite more than anyone else. If your CXO and the CEO are two in diverse positions, it's going to create more confusion unless all of them at the top leadership have also undergone the training where it makes them understand the impact which is going to be had if you have inclusive support. And that is what is very important. So it's not just about training. It's the type of training which you have to do. It is also about doing constant measurements and not just thinking that this is an annual thing which I have to just tick in the box. KPI gives me 10% marking for that training and so we do it. That's not the way it should be taken. It has to be taken much more to take it as part of your own systems where without this training, your company is not going to run. And hence, it needs to be more in-depth and more focused in the way it is going to be trained.
Thanks, Sudha. I have another question which I'll come back to you for a little later when it comes to the business aspect. But right now, I will be turning to Anisha. Inclusion expert Seema Lieberman says that for D&I to benefit an organization and sustain itself, people have to know each other, engage in meaningful interactions, and learn skills to be more culturally intelligent, which benefits everyone. Anisha, I want to ask you, what do you think comes first? Culture of intentional inclusion first or diversity? Because I know of quite a few organizations that bring in inclusion first and go to diversity later. Do you think that's possible, or do you think there is another smart way of doing it? How do we approach it?
I want to approach this question very simply. As a practitioner, culture for me is always top down. Okay, while we might say that culture is bottoms up and let's try and find a middle ground or whatever, but practically in a business environment, in a corporate environment, culture is top down. Let's take the example of, say, any startup. Okay, the founders today have the opportunity to shape the culture of an organization. Yeah. So what is culture? It's a set of attitudes and behaviors of a collective set of attitudes and behaviors of an organization. So in an organization, the collective set of attitudes and behaviors of the top leadership team is what will shape the culture of the organization. Now, let's just say that this set of people, top down, have by definition created a very powerful, I don't even want to use lofty words like vision, mission, a very powerful purpose statement for the organization, that we exist because we want to do this for the world. I'll take the example of when we do business workshops, and I do a lot of purpose workshops. Say, for example, Arvind Eye Care. We had this doctor, I don't know, if you've read the case study, who was a practitioner, a very, very famous doctor. And in his 50s, he decided to retire and start on his own. His whole insight was that 80% of blindness in the world is needless blinding, okay, which can be cured by simple operation. And his whole inspiration came from, the biggest barriers to that was awareness, of course, and the second one was cost. His whole inspiration of getting the cost down came from when McDonald's came to India. And they said, if the world over, if a McDonald's burger, at that point in time, $1 used to be 35 rupees. World over, if a McDonald's burger can be actually sold for $1 equivalent, then why can't we standardize these operations in a manner that the cost is just X or whatever? Now, that one individual, with his strong purpose statement that we will eliminate all needless blindness from the country. Okay, needless. People need not be blind, but they're blind. He set that purpose and he set that culture. And today, the number of operations that they do in a day, it's not just the cost that they have replicated from McDonald's, but also this assembly line approach. Okay, because they also don't get doctors. So each doctor is only supposed to do this for 10 minutes because they realize that the operation time is only so much, but it's the before and after that takes a lot of time. So he actually got his learnings from this entire process. But the reason why I use that example is that if leaders and if the top leadership team decides to create a purpose statement, which is very, very inclusive, okay, and make it not just inclusive to the organization, but inclusive to the world at large. We exist because we want to remove needless blindness from the country. You will engage diverse set of resources. You will get not just the most experienced doctors, but you will also get people, like I said, the assembly line approach, who will help you complete the process. So for me, diversity is an action that comes later. Inclusion is a larger thought. It's part of the culture which can come right from, the top team. And once that is set and cast in stone, the whole business model gets established around it.
Great, Anisha. I like that assembly line approach example very much. I have quite a few questions. I hope I hurry up, and I am not going to end it on time. So let me give out that message because I do want to address those questions. But let me be very fair to Sudha, since she joined in late. Sudha, your next question, so that I go back with a good conscience, is that as we are trying to do our bit towards diversity hiring through India Diversity Job Fair 2021 taking place along with our discussion here, we need to look at one important angle, that of business. We've spoken about people, but people won't get jobs if there aren't good businesses that thrive. So does intentional inclusion help with improving the business of an organization? If yes, Why do we not go all out and help build an organization on the ladders of intentional inclusion? Again, I'm emphasizing on the word intentional. Why do we ignore that people feeling included in a system will deliver to the best of their abilities and help increase the revenues of an organization? The business question, Sudha.
So let's face it, I think the positive impact of diversity and inclusion, I don't think there is any doubt at all, and it's not debatable that the impact is very good for any business. I think studies by Deloitte, by Gartner, all have proved that you achieve better business outcomes, 6 times more likely to have becoming more innovative and agile, and it's 2 times more than the targets which you have fixed for yourself, you're going to achieve them. And this is a proved study. So I don't think businesses will have any doubts that intentional inclusion is going to help them. Diversity will help them. But the question comes about the challenge which they are facing more than anything else is about understanding why inclusion is necessary. Understanding what is the impact if inclusion is not there. What is the impact on the business, the adverse impact which is going to be had on the businesses. I think that while both diversity and inclusion are important, diversity without inclusion is going to create a toxic culture. And that is going to impact the businesses. When I say toxic culture, what I mean is you have a group of people whom you're brought in because of diversity, who are not seen as or do not feel as being part of the company. Their contribution, their impact on the business is going to be negative for you. So when I say toxic culture, it is not only about the business contribution, it is also about the well-being of the company, which is going to be impacted when you do not include this group of people whom you think you have ticked the box and brought in to show diversity in your company, and then realize that they don't feel included, they don't feel part of your goals, they don't feel part of the business to show that they're contributing something, will have an adverse impact on the business. So why do businesses not give that much importance? One is because, as I think Gautam mentioned, people have been tending to put it as a tick in the box where they feel that, okay, 9% I've achieved my target for diversity. So it is more because people just feel we have to fill it in. The second is they feel that once I have taken people inside, I'm not doing it for the general. So why should I do the training specially for these including people? And here I would like to differentiate a little bit. When I say only the people who have come under this diverse category, I feel that even the general people need to be given training, because it is not about only the diverse people. It is about the general people also accepting that they have other talents. It is much like what I think Anisha mentioned about women being also understanding, the men also understanding how the women work and women understanding how the men work. So it is necessary that both sides get training and acknowledging that there are some talents, there are some strengths which are there in this diverse group which you have taken. And that comes in only when the leadership brings in that role and allows the training to be brought in and acknowledge that these are people who have achieved a lot and can contribute a lot. The other thing is periodically measuring. See, just bringing in diverse people is not enough. Even just doing an inclusion or training is not sufficient unless you can measure whether the impact has been felt. How much have they contributed? Have they become part of your system? The challenge is that once they feel that it has been done, a training program has been put, they feel that is sufficient for the whole thing. It is not. It is much like how the women directors have come in. It also means that you need to grow with the things to make it understand that it is part of your general listing and the contribution is very high. I think that more than anything else will be impactful for you.
Great, thank
Vidyottama,
you.
I just want to add a point to what Sudha and both Anisha said, and I just want to try and bridge it. I think what's very important is that we may have many communities and we may have many initiatives, but the ability of the leader or the CXO to link and label, to be seen there, to be accessible, to investing his time. We had this view that that all leaders need to spend 20-25% of their time on human relations issues or on people issues. I think they need to really in their minds understand that they need to spend 10 or 15% of the time on inclusion and diversity, because that is the foundation of every single HR initiative that you want to drive in the organization. If they realize the power of inclusion and diversity, then and the impact it will have on the other HR processes or people processes, then the whole thing will unfold much better.
Thank you for
just a
bringing
second.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The one thing which Gautam had mentioned about the millennials is very important. Going forward, unless a company, most millennials look for this inclusion. They really appreciate a company which is giving importance for diversity and inclusion. And if your company wants to succeed and continue to grow, unless you are going to show that there is a platform for you where there is inclusion, you're going to be moved out of the whole thing. As Jackwell said, change before you have to. Otherwise, you're not going to exist.
No, very, very nice points you're all bringing out, because this is the new world order and we ought to be with the times, and we all have to adapt and blend it. So I know that the time is up, but I'm not giving up. I need to give you all at least two minutes more, because I have some very important questions. So requesting you all to be very, very crisp. One question that bothers me always is that we inadvertently focus on equalizing and enriching the cultural ethos of workplaces. However, people do not get born in these work ecosystems. They come from different homes, different religions, different backgrounds, different streets, different beliefs, and they go back to the same place after their day at work. So how much ever they are sensitized, they return to the same conscious or unconscious biases held for generations in their homes, in their societies, among their friends. How does this partial sensitization or partial inclusion work in the long run? Gautam, I'm bringing it to you. And be crisp, please.
So I'm just going to give you a small example, and I hope it explains the whole. If you look at safety, right, we look at safety and build a culture of safety in plants. And one of the things you realize is that safety is not just restricted to the plant. It has to be taken to the next level when you go back to the family and you go back to your friends and so on and so forth. So we have to drive initiatives that look at element of diversity and inclusion, not just in the plant or the office, but also when we are outside, at our with our children in this interacting with colleagues, with schools, with colleges. We have to do that. We have to build that. And that is a responsibility we have to make it, like somebody said, completely boundaryless, so that people understand the issue of inclusion and diversity just doesn't end at, when you swipe out your card, but also the fact that it continues beyond. And this is how companies are driving the safety culture, making it more holistic. So just an example, right? They would have a program on festival safety. Right, during Diwali, they'll run this program for people in the organization so that people understand that when they go home and burst firecrackers and all, what are the safe elements that you need to do. Similarly, we need to drive this, take a step and do that, and that's where we'll achieve this holistic.
Yeah, true. Because I believe in a fireside chat just before us, a company, I'm forgetting which one, had taken up this about inviting the spouses also. For sensitization, etc. So I think that small things like seating arrangement, opportunities to talk or be heard, recognition, empowering people to take decisions, etc., small things that go in a long way in creating an inclusive workplace. However, we need to look beyond the one-way channel that we often discuss. We're sensitizing, we are training, we are giving workshops, we are framing policies. All these are one-way tickets to an inclusive ecosystem. I would want to know, and I have this question both for Ritu and Ankit. I'm going to Ritu first. I would want to know that despite all this, if there is wrongdoing, and if people are segregated on various aspects or ridiculed or mocked, and they go back to their seniors to report it, are the seniors, the leaders, morally equipped to handle and solve it? Ritu, do you think that the leaders are framing, what do you say, punitive measures, if that is a right word, I don't know, but ways to solve this, that if the policies and if the initiatives aren't working out?
Short answer, See, there are two ways. I want to take the approach of creating metaphors, stories, and pro-engage with the leaders, managers, superiors, seniors, whatever word we use it. But let's say more than 50% of the organization, I will pro-engage with them, so that when I create role modeling stories, create scenarios, I play act a harassment, a play act, a ridiculing, play act something, they don't take it personally. They are genuinely listening, like my DNI champs are listening right now. So that pro engage has to be an ongoing process. Cannot get tired, cannot leave it. It has to be an ongoing process. Then, when actually the action happens, you are not only acting on reacting, you are not reacting, you are actually prepared and you can deal with it. So what we do and what I'm telling all of you is that when the situation happened, it's best managed by the two parties. Okay. All of If I am harassed, or some word which has been spoken, or I have been patted on my shoulder and which I did not like, I said, I'm sorry, step back, and that issue is over. That story all of you would have heard, that a monk carried a woman, old woman, and she was and helped her cross the river. And the other guy said, "You are a monk, and how did you do that?" He's saying, "You are carrying her. I have left her there, dropped her there." That story. So that is exactly. So I will first level one harassment, deal with it there and then between two people, and it is done with. No, always it's not possible. Go to the next level, and that is where superior comes in, and pro engaging would help it there, because they are equipped, they are expecting, they know most of the time. Third level, of course, fortunately in India, there are very defined posh guidelines, and they have gone to that many details that Gautam and I don't have to do anything. It's already done, and we have to just follow it and ensure we are training, retraining, super training our managers. Of course, there will always be exceptions, Vidyottama. And again, that first thing I said, mindfulness of that realization that we are intentionally looking at both the genders. We are looking at both the generation. If you club all the other generations and Gen Z and Gen Y, what are you saying? If you take TCS as a reference of the country that we have, 86% are Gen Y and Gen Z. That 15% has become 14. Very soon, in next 5 years, the seniors that generation will only be 10-12%. So you really have to understand. I personally feel, and I disagree with some of the statements, that that generation, actually the young generation, they don't even care about inclusion. They are inclusive right from the, the day they were born, because we gave them that society. It's we who have to change.
That's very poignant. That's very poignant. Ankit, I'm bringing the same question to you, and I'm expecting a wider discussion on that. It is one thing to give gyan one way, another to implement it oneself and give solutions. Though Ritu has answered it very well, I'm sure you'll bring in another take. What if a woman reported she was molested? Or a member of the LGBTQ plus community said that they were used a particular word while being addressed, or a Sikh employee said that Sardarji jokes are being cracked when he's sitting along with his colleagues. That's indirectly excluding a person. Does the organization take punitive action? And you are in this field for a very long time, so I want that expertise. The reports must be coming to you, because if action isn't taken, I believe all this talk of sensitization, positive impact on business, etc., means nothing. Ankit.
Yeah, I think Ritu has already covered this question very well, but I'll try and throw in a perspective. I think responsibility and accountability go hand in hand. What one needs to ensure is that responsibility should not be without empowerment and requisite tools that are needed to drive those results. Now you have laid down policies, done trainings, created and rolled out sponsored DNI programs, and still if things are not changing on the ground, then I think leaders will have to be made accountable. Now, how you enforce that accountability will have to be decided on the merits of the case. Now, whether it is reprimanding or fines or penalties or a change in policy itself, that call will have to be taken, depending on what the merits of the case is. And if I can say, sometimes you have to take those hard calls, take that decisive action to give a strong message, then unacceptable behavior will not be tolerated.
Great. Anisha, would you want to take 30 seconds or something, to add your point here?
I think both Ritu and Ankit have covered it quite well. Finally, I think the only thing that I want to say is that today the new generation is actually experiencing change even at home, and this change takes a lot of time. So new generation, if you see our children behave so differently when it comes to being inclusive. The relationship between siblings is so different, between parents and children is so different, at least in the larger metro world and in the corporate world, where we come from. So you will see that as time elapses, some of these things will, we will not need to debate them, because today I see I have two grown-up children, I mean, the minute I say something to my daughter, my son jumps into her defense. And I feel so good because, if he's jumping into his sister's defense, he would do that when it comes to his wife as well, and how inclusive he will be when it comes to her career. And, that's what we hope, that today's children, are a lot more aware, a lot more sensitive. It's the middle, I call it the sandwich generation, which is
I'm sorry, Anisha, I'm holding you there. I see Gautam chuckling over there, and I'm giving him 30 seconds. Only 30 seconds, Gautam. Do you want to add something here?
No, I completely agree with what everyone has said. So that's my 20 seconds in this.
Okay. Sudha, would you want 30 seconds to add to this point, and then we are ending up, because I'm getting...
No, I definitely agree. The millennials, I think the present generation have already understood what is inclusivity. It's unfortunate that the older generation need to understand the same thing. It's a question of time. I don't think it's difficult, because they will see the changes which are coming in, and so they will automatically have to change, because at home things are changing. They will be forced to change it in the office also.
Yeah, slowly it will change. And I remember a very popular couplet in Hindi. मुझे सिर्फ पहली line याद है, धीरे धीरे रे मना धीरे सब कुछ होए. I don't remember the second line, but you all have been a wonderful panel. It was brilliant chatting with you and enhancing my what do you say, intelligence quotient when it comes to intentional inclusion. Thank you very much, and we wrap up for the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.